of successful leadership, and an important component of inspirational motivation. The Harvard Business Review article that Karen mentioned was based on about 360-degree performance evaluations of over 2,800 corporate executives from 149 countries. The article reported that women were rated to be as effective or more effective than men on 9 out of 10 categories. So that raised the question in my mind, what about that? So, however, according to the article, and I quote, women are judged to be less visionary than men in 360-degree feedback. This may be a matter of perception, but it stops women from getting to the top. For this study, I used a grounded theory approach to really understand the experiences of 12 women, the leaders who had been nominated by a cabinet-level leader on their cabinets as having envisioned and led change. The participants served at 6 Southern California institutions belonging to the Council for Christian Colleges and Universities. Because my goal was to interview women who had envisioned and led significant change, I used purposeful sampling to identify the participants. And in the study, I conducted 2 rounds of interviews, including a visit to each campus for their initial interview. My research question explored how do women in leadership positions at faith-based colleges and universities develop and implement a vision that results in an institutional change. The theory that emerged from that looks very convoluted, but it's not. The women describe the process of envisioning. So in this, it describes the 3 aspects of the envisioning process, which were clear in the data. One was comprehensive information gathering, making sure they did their homework. Number 2, deeply collaborative processing. And number 3, a future-oriented framing of how to address an existing institutional problem. Those are the 3 circles inside of Wikkerink. I want to just speak a little bit of the collaborative process. Deeper exploration into the collaborative process that was used by these women indicated in the study that the perception of women lacking vision is inaccurate. In actuality, the collaborative envisioning and leading process resulted in most of these participants not being widely recognized as the single visionary force behind the change, but rather as part of a larger team that was responsible for bringing about desired change. Although these 3 themes were critical components of the change process, a set of internal drivers that the very center circle in that bubble, and we've broken it out. There are 7 components that make up that internal driving force. So these internal drivers motivated these women through the entire process of envisioning and leading the change. For example, the participants' level of self-confidence significantly influenced their ability to take the risk to move the envisioned change forward. Additionally, the driving force of concern for people who care for the institution were critical motivators to advance the change, as well as to overcome obstacles and fear. But we, as the 5 graduates, given our 7 minutes, were asked to identify one key finding from our research. For me, that fact was, right back to this one, which is the outer circle that surrounds that complete process. And that is the institutional mission and values. This was a critical finding of my study. In other words, data were clear that envisioning and implementing any successful change initiative must be consistent with the mission and purpose of the institution. In my study, the mission was referred to by different participants as a compass, an anchor, and the institutional DNA. One participant stated that any vision for change must have an explicit connection to the mission of the university so that we have that sense of higher purpose. Another participant observed that the vision needs to connect to the values of the people. For the participants, the institutional mission provided meaning and purpose. It created a source of connectedness for students, staff, and faculty, and both enabled and motivated individuals to see how they could contribute to the fulfillment of that mission. This study provided many constructive insights for women leaders, as well as implications for higher education leaders and practitioners. Oh, I'm done. I missed the 2-minute warning and got that done message. All right, well, there are several messages. All right. Anyhow, the centrality of the mission fit to the change process suggests that passion and care for the institutional mission contributes to developing a strong sense of community. In other words, it's the glue that holds everything together, which may be particularly true for these Christian colleges. A strong, clear, inspirational mission provides direction, meaning, and purpose. The women in this study noted that their busyness and getting bogged down in the weeds was a barrier to vision casting. If women's vision ability is to be recognized, finding or making time for future-oriented thinking is imperative. Lastly, women's use of language was viewed as another barrier to being seen as visionary in a male-formed organization. Both women and men would benefit from training about gender communication styles and valuing their different perspectives, working together to move the institution. Just want to go now to my list of appreciation. This is beyond my 7 minutes, so I can take a little bit. My dissertation was a wonderful journey of exploration and interesting findings, and I want to publicly thank several groups of people. Firstly, the 12 women leaders who opened up their hearts and shared their experience with me. It made a real difference in my life as I listened to their experiences. My dissertation committee, this was huge. Karen spent many hours, even on holidays, even over Christmas, with me, wordsmithing things and helping me do the edits. I can't thank Karen enough as my dissertation chair. Eileen was my methodologist, and she brought me hope and perspective when I needed it most. So thank you, Eileen. The APU faculty, I want to mention each one of you. Your encouragement and support throughout my coursework has been amazing, and I can't thank you enough. My amazing 2009 cohort. We have lockdowns, as Eileen said, on our orientation, and we have been there for one another, and we have had a special bond, and I just thank you, particularly Richard, my Canadian buddy. So it's a real special treat for me to be graduating with him today. Above all, my precious family and friends who have just unconditionally loved me and supported me through this journey, who believed in me. My husband, Mike, who has had the patience of Job too, and the loss of a wife for 5 years, so he's very happy to have his wife back. And finally, I'd like to mention my mentor and friend, Dr. Dennis Jameson from Trinity Western University, who was the one who challenged me to think about pursuing my doctorate, a dream I never thought was possible, and it's possible for everyone.
Now it's time to grill. Just, we only have 3 questions, but out of what series for you? Okay, 2 minutes of questions. I see some hands. Debbie and then Andrew. Okay.
It changed my view significantly about women in leadership, but it also changed my view significantly as I viewed myself as a woman leader. I guess I was in that category where I perceived women as less visionary, and so hearing the stories of women, hearing their experiences, and learning that they were visionary and that it was inaccurate, gave me hope. And I wanted to pass that hope on to other emerging women leaders.
Dr. Connor, my name is Andrew Mulder. My question is, fines for the women perceived in other colleges in each way that maybe men don't always perceive.
Interesting question, Andrew. Yes, I would say it was the guiding force for them, the women. It was the connection. It held everything, and that's why I used the circle around it. It held everything together. Everything they did was driven by that mission. Whether that's different from men, I can't speak to because my study didn't go there, but definitely these women were passionate about that mission, fulfilling that mission, contributing to that mission, and making the changes contribute to that mission. It was a very strong influence. Does that answer your question?
Thank you.
You should like your doctoral dissertation on that one.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Young Ki, faculty member of higher education here at the EU. It is my great pleasure and honor to introduce Dr. Ken Armstrong to you. She is Assistant Dean of Undergraduate Curriculum and Student Affairs at Robbins College of Health and Human Sciences at Baylor. She joined this program in 2010 when I also newly joined this program as a faculty member. So she was one of my first students in my research design class, and she was one of my first research team members, and also now she is my first PhD student from Wikkerink. In her dissertation, Ken examined the patterns of student development in cognitive affective outcomes among students attending Southern Baptist institutions, and identify the college experiences that contribute to these outcomes among the population as compared to those among students and other types of institutions, such as other CCCU institutions, Catholic institutions, and sectarian institutions. Perhaps her study is the first to investigate educational outcomes and college experiences among students at Baptist institutions using a very intensive set of variables from a national longitudinal data set. I was the chair and methodologist of CAMP's dissertation, and Dr. Karen Longman was a committee member, and Dr. Jason Ryan, the director of research project at the Council of Independent Colleges, was another member. So I'm so proud of Ken for her accomplishment in her dissertation and her passion and positive attitude toward research. So now let me turn this to you over to Dr. Ken.
Thank you, Kim. All right, as Dr. Kim has shared, the topic of my dissertation was educational outcomes at Southern Baptist institutions as compared to some of their peers at CCCU, Catholic, and the non-religious institutions as well. In 2012, the Bain & Company Consultants published a report about the financial sustainability of universities, and they said this: the worst case scenario for an institution is to be relatively expensive, which most Christian private colleges are, and completely undifferentiated. So the question in my study is, what makes a Southern Baptist college different than their peers and to the other schools that are out there doing really great Christian education as well? A little bit of background: there's about 50 Southern Baptist institutions around the country, serving about 135,000 students. They're only loosely affiliated with one another, but many of them are members of the CCCU. So my research questions were, to what degree do students at Southern Baptist colleges develop cognitive, affective, and civic outcomes during their time in college, and how does that compare with their peers in these three categories? And then once we establish what that level of development is, what are the predictors, what are the college experiences that make that pattern of development within this population, and then how does that compare with their peers? So I purchased the College Senior Survey and the corresponding freshman survey from the Higher Education Research Institute out of UCLA. I had about 26,000 participants in my sample across 101 institutions. And for the analysis, I did quite a few different quantitative measures, as you can see here, to answer the questions in different ways. And then ultimately did quite a few separate multiple regressions to look at the comparison. So as I said, I'm looking at three different types of outcomes: cognitive, affective, and civic. So for each of those, I chose two dependent variables. And all these dependent variables are factor scales, so they're a conglomeration of questions put together, not just one single item on the survey. And then I had a whole host of independent variables for the multiple regression, about 35 or 40. These are the categories that they fell within, to try to see what is happening on the college campuses that's leading students to this development. So what did I find out? Lots and lots and lots of things, but we cannot cover them all. So this is just an example. I don't know if you can see, no need to look at the numbers, but if you can see the red, that means that in these categories, there was a significant difference between the Southern Baptist sample and their peer institutions. So as you can see, there's a lot of red in here. So two things I would point out. The Southern Baptist sample was consistently higher in outcomes than the CCCU. There was only one outcome of the six where it wasn't significantly different. And also, if you look at kind of the third end of the chart, there's no red. And that section is the mean differences. So what I found is that the population that are entering schools may be significantly different in the pretest. The outcomes when they graduate may be significantly different, some leading others, but really that amount of growth and that amount of change that's happening across the four types of institutions isn't really that different. They're all developing at about the same rate. Some strengths that I found: For Southern Baptist institutions, the students reporting higher levels of cognitive skills. This is where the students were asked retrospectively to look back on and say, how much have you learned about critical thinking, about your major, things like this. They had a higher score there. Social self-concept. I like to thank people from the South. They're very social, and my study found that to be true, both at the pre-test when students came in and when they graduated, the Southern Baptist sample was consistently higher than all the other groups. And then civic outcomes, both civic awareness, knowing what's going on in society and the world, and then social agency, feeling like it's important to go out and do something and to be involved were higher on these self-reported measures in many cases. A weakness that I identified was sense of belonging. This surprised me. Among all 4 types of institutions, the Southern Baptist groups did report the lowest levels of sense of belonging. Had thought maybe a group that are going to school at such a specific denominational school would already have maybe some kinship, and that belonging would come easily, but they were even significantly lower than the non-sectarian groups. And that was definitely something to continue to look at and explore in the future. When I looked into the patterns of development, so many things came to light, and I'm just going to touch on a couple of those today. So what I found to be true of the Southern Baptist institutions was there was no significant relationship between student organizations and social self-concept. So at all other campuses, being involved in student organizations is teaching people those leadership skills, those public skills, but that's not happening in Southern Baptist institutions for some reason. So that's an opportunity for growth in that front. And the same for student-faculty interaction. Of course, we know student-faculty interaction is so potent across outcomes, across institutions. This is the only place in my study that a significant relationship did not show up. And so what this is saying is that interaction that students have with faculty is teaching them to be more civically aware of what's going on, but for some reason the agency's not there. It's not prompting them to get out and go do something, and that's really a huge missed opportunity. So what are the implications of, let's get that. What are the implications of my study? First of all, research-wise, I would really recommend disaggregating faith-based samples when you have the opportunity. We have a lot of research from the CCCU, and we're very grateful for that. But if you have the chance to pull out groups that might have similar interests, you may find, as I did, that we're really significantly different on some important things, and that's helpful research. My charge to Southern Baptist institutions, if they read my dissertation, would be to capitalize on your strengths. Social self-concept, cognitive skills, civic awareness. Students are performing well in these areas and they feel good about how they're doing. And so use that to really capitalize, maybe make that your defining issue about what your school is about and what you're good at producing. And then, of course, student-faculty interaction, diversity engagement, volunteer work. We all know those are great best practices in student experience, and that showed up time and time again as themes in my findings. And then finally, to address that sense of belonging weakness. Not sure what's going on there, but such an important issue that can lead to greater retention, things like that, so to look in and see what else is going there. That's it, I did it. So, I will say thank you to Dr. Kim. We've had a great relationship for the last 5 years. I've thoroughly enjoyed being on her research team. We published my first article together, and we're continuing to work together on projects, and she's really taught me to be a scholar, and that's made me a better practitioner in my job every day. Thank you to Karen and to Jesse, who are my other committee members, just wonderful content experts in this area, great editors, and have really helped me to make this something I'm proud of and excited about. And then to all the faculty, I just wanted to say thank you. I think some of you guys who are new will quickly find this is a life-changing program. And I'm not the same person that I was 5 years ago. And so thank you for investing in us and teaching us all the things that you have. And then finally, to my family and to Patrick, my boyfriend, I feel like the last 5 years been a lot of sacrifice. I've moved a lot and I've studied a lot and I've missed a lot of important family things. And I'm very excited to now be done with this chapter of my life and be able to be more available to everyone. But thank you for your patience and support and all that. All right, thank you very much.
So now we may receive one or two questions.
Were there specific
Good question. So that was, I didn't, that was the only variable of student faculty interaction. It was a factor scale. But in fact, what I can say on that point is that the Southern Baptist Institution, if you looked at the descriptive statistics just before our random progression, they were the highest and most frequent. So students were saying they were interacting with faculty on those campuses more so than at any other time. So that's a great positive that it's happening. So I would like to investigate what's happening it's not prompting them to get involved. So good and bad in the findings there. Chris, yours?
Yes, Chris Mendoza, proud member of Doctoral. If you could envision this research by someone else, what is the direction that you'd like to pass on to someone else?
Well, I think in our committee we talked a lot about this would be a great project to be duplicated with different types of denominations. So I think it's so important, like I said, going forward, that what's different about our Christian college? There's 100 great Christian colleges in the CCCU, but there's 900 religiously affiliated colleges, and as access and affordability continue to be huge issues and budget cuts, I think Christian colleges need to understand what's their niche, what's their distinctive. And so I would like to continue the work in the area that I'm interested in, Baptist colleges, but I think this work could be done in lots of different organizations to be able to see, give students choice about what brand of Christian higher education they really want.
Our next presenter, and I should move this way up because he's a lot taller. So Wally Rude is the next presenter. He began the program in 2011, so he's an example of the 4-year plan. Yes. Okay. He's the vice president for student life at Armstrong University College and did his dissertation on outdoor orientation experiences and thriving. So I chaired his committee, and Kim was his methodologist, and Andrew Obelia from who is a journal editor in this area of his experiences. So I have to say, I think, Wally, I don't know if you remember this, but we were in Finland when sat beside me on the van, and everything changed after that. So I'm kind of interested in this wilderness experience. He was just starting, not even in the second year of the program, and began thinking about his dissertation. And what I would say from working with Wally, he's been a joy to work with all the way through. He's been very committed to this topic, and I actually might want to engage in a wilderness experience after reading his dissertation. Go ahead.
Good afternoon. I'm very pleased with the department is an English lesson for next summer. You can have anyone else join if they want to. Well, my dissertation topic explored the relationship between outdoor orientation and student thriving. And really, given this topic, ideally we would all be out in the Canadian Rockies wilderness sitting around campfires. I think if this presentation should just happen. So really since World War II, student success outcomes such as grades and graduation rates have remained a dominant focus of higher education. often I think pushing efforts to focus on student well-being. Yet holistic student development has historically been the focus of higher education in North America. Now, although thriving is a relatively new construct in higher education, it indeed expands the view of student success. Students who thrive are marked by optimal functioning, intellectually, socially, and emotionally. And as the conceptualization has shifted towards a more holistic view, so too has campus programming that expands holistic well-being, such as outdoor orientation programs. Currently, there's about 191 campuses across mostly the US, but also in Canada, that actually offer these kinds of programming. The elements of outdoor orientation include small groups, adventure programs, competent instructors, reflection, and an outdoor setting. And I believe that actually these kinds of experience represent a pathway to thriving. Therefore, my research question is this: what is the contribution of participation in an outdoor orientation program to the variation of thriving among undergraduate college students after controlling the demographic variables? Data was collected in 2014 using the Thriving Quotient from 3 different organizations, 2 from the US, 1 from Canada, all offering outdoor orientation programs. I use structural equation modeling because this is a powerful technique that allows for graphical representation of multiple regression equations. This picture here represents how I felt after months of data analysis. And if Dr. Schroeder's on, she might have felt this way a little bit as well. I was pleasantly surprised with some of the interesting findings. This is a model, final model of my analysis. It's quite complex, so I'll have you focus on the very bottom part of the screen. And indeed, we actually found a positive and significant but indirect pathway from outdoor orientation up through thriving, which is really the key finding. We also found that when we looked at diverse citizenship as one of our outcome variables, that outdoor orientation also had a very strong relationship with that particular variable. In terms of major findings, the outdoor orientation seemed to be a gateway experience for early student involvement. I believe self-efficacy was at play here, but I think the main reason for this particular finding was related to instruction. These programs are very intense, and I believe that students will develop a very strong relationship and connection with the faculty, which sometimes are actually faculty or students. And as instructors got to know most students, they would likely advise them about future involvement opportunities back on campus. And I believe because of that trust relationship, that interaction, students would keep that in place. And they would end up becoming involved early on in campus. The connection between outdoor orientation and diverse citizenship seemed plausible for 2 reasons. First, outdoor orientation programs create conditions for optimal dissonance. And within this environment, students are likely to be more reliant on diverse others to meet their needs in this program. Second, authentic connections are more likely because of the unplugged environment, which facilitates human and not virtual interaction. So recommendations for practice and for policy, I think the main thought here is that I believe access needs to be considered. Although these programs are growing in terms of the number of students that are participating, I believe that there's still some students that don't have access to this kind of opportunity. I think sometimes that financial difficulties are one of those reasons. I think universities need to create programs, either make this a free program or create an aid in which students can have access. It's also recommended that outdoor orientation programs utilize the small group format, which is a very powerful pedagogy, and that groups are diverse, allowing for authentic cross-racial interaction. The final recommendation deals with a psychological sense of community. The contribution of psychological sense of community to thriving is very powerful. Therefore, outdoor orientation programs should cultivate the 4 components of psychological sense of community. In fact, that one of the first components is a sense of belonging, so maybe this program could actually self-practice. To add the voice of influence, it's also critical that the instructor training focus on facilitation skills and listening skills. It's also recommended that students unplug from technology during the experience in order to cultivate quality human interaction. So inconvenience did indeed illuminate an indirect pathway from outdoor orientation to thriving, suggesting that outdoor orientation experiences provide an entry point for early campus involvement that fosters a propensity for further involvement, which leads to psychological sense of community. In addition, the pedagogy of outdoor orientation experiences seems to cultivate the conditions in which interdependent relationships with diverse others can flourish. I think the challenge for educators will be great access and to continue to build quality. So I would like to offer a few thank yous myself at this point in time. First, let me begin with my dissertation committee, Dr. Lori Schreiner, Dr. Young Kim, and Dr. Andrew Babilia. You were simply stellar. Lori, I don't know if you remember or not, but when you were in Calgary with the research team, you looked me in the eye and said, Wally, you can do this. And those words were very powerful to me because at that point in time, I didn't think I actually could do it. So those words stuck with me. Thank you for believing in me, introducing me to thriving, and sharing my community excellence. Kim, thank you for your gentle words of encouragement. That meant a lot to me, and for your exceptional expertise in spiritual equation. So my cohort of peers from 2011, suck it up, Princess cohort. Thank you for your diverse perspectives and the rich conversation and embracing me as the only international student. To the APU faculty, thank you for teaching and living well. It's very different, I think, because of what you're doing. I'd also like to acknowledge John Wallace, who providentially took me out for lunch in 2013 at sort of a low point in my dissertation process. That was part of the Finland piece, and encouraged me to pursue this dissertation. To my mother and father-in-law, thanks for your hospitality and giving me access to rate at your guest cabin at Collie Lake. I hope that continues. To my parents, along with my Auntie Elma, thanks for cheering loudly and enthusiastically along the valleys and the peaks. To our children, James, Caleb, and Annika, thank you for engaging me in many dinner conversations, which usually ended up with, Dad, if you quit talking about this conversation. Which I haven't taken personally. I get it. And finally, to my wife Paula, to my lifelong partner, thanks for your faithful support over the years in many important ways you share in this project. And I'm tremendously grateful for it. And I'll end with, I hope indeed this project will survive.
Entertain some questions. So his question was, did the length of the experience? Yeah.
It's a very good question. participating institution, the orientation programs range from 3 days to 18. I didn't specifically look at that question, but in the literature, it seemed as though the 8 two-day programs were somewhat more effective in creating the condition with some positive outcomes. Partly because of greater opportunity to connect with each other, and especially to engage in these challenging activities that are progressive. And so that actually would be a recommendation, is to sort of pursue the longer program versus the shorter program. So a question related to institutions that may not have the resources to pull this off. I mean, one of the interesting things might be to shorten the program. There's also opportunity to do urban adventure programming. So I looked at campuses that pursue sort of wilderness off campus. But I think you could create some of the conditions that would be effective in an urban setting. And there's also organizations that can help organize this. You wouldn't have to do it on campus itself, wouldn't have to do all the organizing, the expertise itself.
I would, at this point, as Karen's coming forward, we are live streaming this event, and so people say a big hello to those who are watching. And hopefully we will continue doing this for each of the fitting ceremonies so that members of the cohort can see their peers participate.
The good news is we're right on time. Hello to the live streamers. I said at the beginning, it's a real joy to be able to introduce people right at the end of this long journey. And I think perhaps you're getting the idea at this point that the Canadians are taking over the world. We've never before had 3 Canadians present on the same day, so it is historic. And we love our northern neighbors. So our next speaker, Richard Wikkerink, is also Canadian, Associate Provost at Redeemer, University College of Ontario. Richard chose as a dissertation topic its title, How Experiences and Perceptions Shape the Career Aspirations of Mid-Level Student Affairs and Services Practitioners, which is a mouthful. Essentially, given how few very top positions there are in the Canadian Ontario universities, which tend to be very large, what about this middle tier of people who are thinking about whether they're even interested in coming to a very top tier position? But Richard also had the courage to be on my research team for 2 years and was my research assistant for a while. And I love the fact that, I'm not sure exactly why, but he's got a granddaughter now, and my team focuses on women in leadership, and I have been a changed man for having been on my research team for 2 years. So welcome to the platform, and he will be sharing some findings. Eileen worked with him as a methodologist, and Tristy now, but an expert on Canadian higher education as his 3rd committee member.
Well, to start off, hi Mom. At our orientation retreat in 2009, Dr. Eileen Holm gave our cohort a glass flask to remind us that our research should be embedded in our own curiosity. My own curiosity for my dissertation study was connected to my observations of the longevity of the baby boomer generation. I'm not one of them, just off-white. And the longevity of the baby boomer generation in leadership roles and the burden of senior leadership. These questions made me wonder, who will be prepared to take on the senior leadership role in higher education in the future? Prompted the question, what do mid-level leaders think? Our cultural narrative on the other side of the border is one of aspiring to the top role and to attain the highest role possible. Yet the reality is that there are few executive level positions in higher education, and there's a cost to being a senior leader, including being a senior student affairs officer. Understanding what shapes the career aspirations of mid-level student affairs practitioners is significant for three reasons. First, mid-level student affairs practitioners contribute significantly to the health and sustainability of the university as an institution. Second, the demands on executive level positions in higher education are increasingly complex. And thirdly, who's going to replace the current senior student affairs officers? My curiosity was distilled into exactly 21 words. For methodology, I used qualitative methods, and in the absence of current research on mid-level student affairs professionals and a dearth of research on student affairs professionals in Canada, an exploratory qualitative study was appropriate. Chose a grounded theory method approach based on Charnes's work, which required me to focus on the experiences of the participant, not on what the literature told me was what I thought the experience meant. I interviewed 9 interesting and influential student affairs leaders at 5 Ontario universities. Given the institution's size, the participants had what was described as mid-level jobs, but as a leader of a department or multiple departments, they were responsible for significant levels of programming, to 20 staff working on this. The grounded theory method process requires the researcher to become immersed in the data. And the protocol from the interview to the transcription, coding, and in vivo memo writing and analysis allowed me to achieve intense depth of knowledge of data. Through the coding process, clusters or groups of codes came together and I wrote memos around similar categories. The writing of the memos prompted new questions, which I then took back to the field for more data collections for a second round of interviews, which I then transcribed, coded, and mapped. Through this process, themes emerged with several different categories, and returned to the data with these themes, and from that process began reflecting and achieved a level of saturation with data, and the theory began to emerge. What this research discovered is the real question we are interested in today, along with a model that impresses and baffles an audience. Simply put, the participants were very satisfied with their jobs. They had multiple opportunities to develop their career. They envisioned a career future that would allow them to continue to use their abilities, strengths, and interests, and provide them with a sense of meaningful purpose in their lives. However, that career future might include the senior student affairs officer role, but it also might not. The theoretical model that emerged from my data is on the screen, and I'll be focusing on just one of the findings in the middle section, the satisfaction opportunity cycle. The satisfaction opportunity cycle was synergistic and was found both in promotions participants pursued and in the professional engagement in their work. Satisfaction did not occur independently, but interacted with and contributed to opportunity. The participants in the study experienced satisfaction at the level of leadership that they had in their current role. This finding was supported in the early recommendations found by Coop, Bandy, and Amy that ownership for taking leadership should permeate all levels of higher education, not simply be focused on the seniors. Satisfaction in its 6 components contributes to a sense of ownership for these participants. As well, contrary to research completed 10 or more years ago by Young, the participants were not dissatisfied, frustrated, or experienced low morale. This study found that mid-level professionals at the Ontario universities were primarily satisfied with their work and careers. And one can speculate that's just because they look like Canadians. Opportunity was comprised of 2 categories: situational opportunities that were largely external factors, while personal opportunities that were made up of internal attributes and motivations of the participant. These work together with the experience of creating a satisfying role to create a cycle of satisfaction and opportunity that sequentially influenced each other. Participants' engagement with an opportunity increased their satisfaction, and the increased satisfaction in turn motivated participants to seek new opportunities. The synergistic relationship between satisfaction and opportunity created a space for participants to imagine a career which included a senior student affairs role, a finding that was supported in Savinkis' career construction theory. The model, however, differs from Savinkis' theory that proposed that individuals exercise ongoing concern and control in their career. Participants described not less control than opportunities in and through their career and did not have regular conversations with supervisors or colleagues about their career. For example, for many of the participants, the interviews was the first time they had an extended conversation. So a couple of implications for practice. Given the multiple multifaceted career options that are available, how will the profession retain mid-level student affairs practitioners with leadership transitions? We need to maximize leadership potential. How do organizational structures maximize this potential? Career conversations with colleagues and supervisors need to occur throughout other careers, not just at the beginning. For future research on more junior layers of administrative staff, those who report directly to the directors should be happening to figure out where they're at. Also, what happens to the satisfaction opportunity cycle during an enrollment, time of enrollment retrenchment? And finally, what is the role of gender in career satisfaction in other administrative departments of education? For my acknowledgements, I'd like to start with thanking my dissertation committee, Dr. Tricia Seifert, for her expertise in student affairs. She started at the University of Toronto, one of my committees, also one of my alma maters. Dr. Eileen Holm, thank you so much for your patient encouragement to student affairs expertise and your sense of humor along the way. Dr. Karen Long, thank you for your maximizing encouragement and your careful attention that allowed me to become much better. I'd like to thank all the AQ faculty for all of your work. I remember starting out 6 years ago and not really knowing where I was going, being overwhelmed with the model dissertation. Dennis Sheridan's first class, and standing here now with my dissertation completed all 250 pages. To the cohort of 2009, we became a very tight group. I honestly arrived 6 years ago thinking that I didn't really need any new friends. I had 18 new friends. And I'd like to also just recognize Bruce Primrose's role in pulling our group together. I also want to thank my classmates who educated me about diversity, the different perspectives on faith, and also the opportunity of having a lot of fun together, including a closing party that did bring this to it. Yes, the fact that you were there. All of them. I'd like to acknowledge my parents. My parents are post-World War II immigrants from the Netherlands. They did not have the opportunity to attend post-secondary education, but they made it possible for their children and their grandchildren to participate. I'd like to thank my children. I think I've got a picture of them here. I have a son, my son's on the left there, my two daughters, son-in-law in the middle. They kept me grounded with very simple things like Dad, what's for supper? I'd like to extend a deep appreciation to my wife, Susan, who has encouraged me and remained committed to our marriage vows, which included the words to encourage each other to develop God's gifts, and she has done just that. Our anniversary is tomorrow, 28 years. It's too bad she can't be here today, but I'm very glad that she's healthy and well and will be able to continue. I've been told that you always start out with cute pictures first, but I have to share this. This is my 9-year-old granddaughter, and she was born on the day that I finished my last chapter of my dissertation. I'm very proud of being a doctor. Very proud of the title Doctor Wikkerink, but more proud of the doctor.
I just want to say that Richard also was a complete delight to work with because from A to Z, wanted to write a great dissertation. And a teachable spirit. So who has a question? Mid-level professionals aspiring to senior level leadership or not? If not, you might be able to. Is that okay? And it's probably a completely appropriate discussion. Presenting this afternoon was in the 2005 cohort, which means she was 8 years into it. It took a 2-year extension, which is our maximum, and today she's done. If Lori can look Wally in the eyes and say, you could do this. Shannon had 3 committee members say to her, you can do this, Shannon, and we want you to do it. I just want to say to the students, I don't think you appreciate how much we carry this to a well. So it really needs a lot of she's the interpretive center. And really interesting study. She had previously worked on a campus with a lot of first generation at-risk students and was trying to figure out what contributes to that kind of student. So let's find out what you found out.
In between you and Kate, so here we go. First generation college students, those whose parents not attended college, are approximately a third of the college student population in the United States. However, these students, despite the fact that they are enrolling on our campuses, quite large not actually graduating campuses professionally. Approximately 15% of first generation college students have a bachelor's degree in these years, as compared to about 40% of non-first generation students. That's a big critical gap that we're looking at with these first generation students. It's critical for our society, it's critical for our institutions, but it's particularly critical for these individual students who are wanting a college degree and are not being able to find that level of success. Researchers have identified a large list of characteristics of first generation students, some of them, and these have been linked to students' struggle to be successful in college. And many first generation students are also, they're experiencing these in combination. They're experiencing multiple of these different categories of things that are challenging for them. And this contributes to a complex problem of first generation college student success. Single focus initiatives are pretty common in terms of trying to pick out one of these categories and fix it. There was an article in the LA Times this week about how free college does not solve the problem of success for first generation students. Also, something like remedial coursework, often used as a stopgap or trying to catch up students who are academically required. But that can also complicate things for students. It adds expense and length of time to their degree. So a lot of struggle for these students. As I was processing this literature on first generation students in terms of my own experience with students, it became clear to me that the problem of success for first generation students needs to be approached more holistically. And coincidentally, probably not, I was also working with Lori on a lot of the thriving research. I was actually privileged to be part of the research team that was in the room when we were talking about the very first ideas of thriving. So that was kind of life-changing for me. And thriving provides a great lens to look at first generation college students. It accounts for academic, psychological, and interpersonal well-being. Using thriving as a conceptual framework of building on the literature, I hypothesized a model of success for first generation students that included various demographic variables, family support, campus development, student-faculty interaction, psychological sense thriving to predict first generation students' academic success and their intent to persist in college. I used data from the Thriving Project here at APU 2013 data, and structural equation modeling to test my model, investigating relationships among those variables and their ability to predict the outcome variable. Two models, they look a lot alike. The one for self-reported college grades, very similarly the model for intent to persist. After following all of the steps of structural equation modeling, I was to identify a model that was a good fit for the data, meaning that for first-generation students, included in my study, the combination of variables and the order in which they're presented in the model was able to predict about 24% of the variance in self-reported college grades and intent to persist. A separate model was tested for each outcome variable and was very similar. So, one compelling finding. The most important thing that I found, the most compelling part of my study was the role of thriving, the big picture of the student success for first generation. Students' level of thriving directly predicted both intent to persist and self-reported college grades for first generation students. Understanding first generation students through the lens of thriving is important because the demographics and experiences of this group are very different from non-first generation students. And the diversity of predictors and constructs that comprise thriving can help us understand some of the nuances that might be affecting first generation students. And it can help us devise appropriate intervention. In addition to predicting the outcome variables, thriving was also predicted by several variables in the model. Back in the picture, each of the arrows pointing to the orange thriving oval indicates some level of predictive power. The student's level of psychological sense of community, indicated by the red oval, was overwhelmingly the strongest predictor of thriving. And psychological sense of community comes from students with fit, mattering, and belonging on campuses. The students who reported this increased sense of psychological sense of community were also more likely to report behaviors and experiences related to thriving. What this means for us as researchers, and so what of it all, is that thriving is important to first generation students, to their success, and experiencing psychological sense of community is critical to thriving. Therefore, we need to continue this research on college student thriving. We need to apply it to multiple student groups, to like first generation students, and we need to then build and experience this, see some interventions, do some research that we are finding. We know from research by Shannon and research teams that thriving can partially mediate entry characteristics for students, and that I think is particularly interesting for first generation students who are defined by this entry characteristic. So if we are able to help students thrive, we can reduce some of that potentially negative power of those labels. And further, looking at the role of psychological sense of community, what that plays, how that plays into thriving, also can help us kind of think through that. Areas such as, for example, a learning community or on-campus job experience for students, in spaces on our campus for students to experience fit and therefore affect their thriving and their success. Oh, all right. Okay, I'm doing most of my thank yous in person and in writing because it's kind of time. So briefly, my committee is the only reason I'm here. Karen, Lori, and Dr. Eric McIntosh, who's a 2012, I think, graduate of this program. He stepped in at the last minute when I was panicking and finally decided, yes, I'm actually going to go through it. I'm sure about that for a while. As I pushed through semesters, years of distraction and doubt, they certainly hung with me on and believed in me more than I did in myself from time to time. Laurie and I had a conversation, how many years ago, about the parachute how they have practically adapted this program had instilled that in me. Hey, it worked. So let them do it, ask them for help. Getting started. Okay. That's all I'm going to say. I'm not going to be able to do anymore. So, that's it. Big minds. Oh.
Talk briefly about on-campus work. Contribution right? Briefly comment.
I found very, very little. That's kind of one of the things that I would like to see more of. I found one article that referenced on-campus work study opportunities as a way of I think anecdotally, I've seen this happen, and I think we need to investigate it more. It's one of those complex situations that solve more than one problem, right? It can help students financially, especially first-generation students who are having more, they can work closer to campus. That could be really good for them. And then, you know, having members of the campus community, whether that's advisors or peer mentors who are into them. So that's just kind of one of those looking forward things to think about that I am very much interested in. But yeah, there's not a lot about it in the literature. So it's a someone's dissertation topic. So yeah, thank you. In looking at planning interventions, that can be handled in probably many unique ways as there are on campus. I think that the concept of learning is many schools have piece of that or have it for some student groups, not others. So looking at ways to, I think, build into what our works like and emphasize how that can be taken even deeper to affect change in consideration.
Faculty and graduates will get their regalia. The rest of you get some cake, which will be delivered to the tables while you are taking your comfort break and standing up and stretching your legs. So in about 10 minutes, we will reconvene. You'll hear the music, and that's the sign that the pudding is about to take place.
I know, it's like, oh my gosh, I'm sorry. Okay, I've been having these always. You know! Oh my gosh! Sometimes you have to go through the process. Yes. I mean,
This is such an important day, and one of the gifts from the department that each of these graduates will receive is their hood. And the hood dates back to the 12th century, when clerics and scholars were noted for the hoods that they wore and could be distinguished from lay people. And so in many ways, it's a fitting image of the faith and learning integration that we cherish so deeply at Azusa Pacific University. That we give this hood, the blue velvet on the hood, the light blue indicates the Doctor of Education, and the royal blue indicates the Doctor of Philosophy. And the brick and red are the proud colors of Azusa Pacific University that we expect you to pride. We also give you a nameplate for your desk that indicates you are now Doctor. And I think our alumni office has put some other goodies in here that are for you. Some of our graduates are also getting strengths certificate, the certificate for strengths-based higher education. And Keith Hall will hand the certificates to those graduates. The dissertation chair and the dean will be doing the hooding. So our first candidate is Dr. Candy O'Connor. Our second candidate is Dr. Cam Armstrong. And our third candidate, I gotta make sure we got the right person here, Shannon. But actually, it's Dr. Wally Rude is the next person. Dr. Richard Wikkerink. And finally, Dr. Shannon Pothoven. And Dr. Keith Hall is going to present the strengths-based higher education certificates.
So this is an exciting afternoon. So on behalf of the Noel Strengths Academy and our doctoral program in higher education, it's my distinct pleasure to award this certification in strengths-oriented higher education. Please help me congratulate these individuals to Wally Rude. Dr. Candy O'Connor. And Dr. Cam Armstrong.
Would you please stand with me as Dr. Alex Junn closes us in prayer?
Let's turn to the Lord in prayer, shall we? Lord God in heaven, we thank you so much for your goodness and your grace in our lives. We thank you for this wonderful day, for us to celebrate and be reminded, Lord, of the great calling you've given unto us, Lord, as educators, working with students, being in an academic setting. Indeed, Lord, we embrace this opportunity. We thank you so much, Lord, for these graduates. We commend them to you, Lord, and back to the academy. And now, Lord, we send back all of our students to their families, to their friends, to their various campuses and their communities. Lord, help us to use this wonderful education that we have, the privileges that we've earned, Lord, and use them to act justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with you, Lord, for your sake and for your glory. We thank you in Jesus' name.
For families, we're going to stay for pictures. So, enjoy your afternoon. Thanks for being here. Those of you who want pictures, before you stay on the stage.
Don't post too much, it makes me anxious. Don't post too much, it makes me anxious.
You're a little more
You'll understand SEM and I'll understand coding. It's great. You can get it done. But yeah, so don't forget that. So I'll share with you because I think when we it will especially the environment, I think it's very helpful. It's pretty strong. Here and alive. All of our names are on there. Yeah, so there's a lot. Yeah, I don't think it's bad. so quick. Yeah. And that's our feedback. That's correct. Oh yeah, I'm not there, you know. I'm there, you know. She's like, it's no, he doesn't brag. It's more than like, that's how much I hear. When you're like, oh, you know what you do? I'm like, you're done, fire, you're done. This is not okay. Yeah, no, honestly, there are days where because it makes me feel like I'm just like, I need to start. Okay. I don't want to start yet. There were people in the hotel in 2011 very scary.